The ice storm had been blowing for 3 days straight on Kestrel 7. The mining colony sat at the edge of known space, a frozen rock where humans dug precious metals from the ground and shipped them across the galaxy. It was not a beautiful place. It was not a kind place, but it was home to the few thousand humans who lived there. Jack pulled his coat as he stepped out of the cargo warehouse. His shift had ended an hour ago, but he had stayed late to help unload a shipment of medical supplies. That was the kind of man Jack was. He never said no when someone needed help. He was 34 years old, tall and broad, with tired eyes and rough hands from years of hard work. He had no wife, no children, no family left alive. He lived alone in a small apartment near the edge of the colony, and most nights he ate dinner by himself while watching old Earth movies. The wind cut through his jacket like a knife. Jack lowered his head and walked faster. The abandoned cargo district was the shortest path home, even though most people avoided it after dark. Old shipping containers sat rusting in rows, covered in snow and ice. The lights had stopped working years ago. The colony council never bothered to fix them because no one lived here anymore. Jack was halfway through the district when he heard something. It was a small sound, almost lost in the howling wind. He stopped and listened. There it was again, a whimper, like a small animal in pain. He turned toward the sound. His boots crunched through the frozen ground as he walked between two old containers. The darkness was thick here, but Jack pulled out his work light and pointed it ahead. What he saw made his heart stop. Two small figures were huddled against a broken disposal unit. They were children, but they were not human children. Their skin was pale blue, like the color of winter sky just before sunset. Their hair was white as snow. They wore thin clothes that offered no protection against the cold. Frost had formed on their arms and faces. They were shaking so hard that Jack could hear their teeth clicking together. The older one was a girl. She looked about 6 years old in human terms, though Jack knew alien species aged differently. She was holding the younger one, a boy who could not have been more than 3 or 4. She had wrapped her own body around him, trying to keep him warm with heat she did not have. Around the girl's neck hung a sign made from scrap metal. Words had been carved into it in Galactic Common, the shared language of space. Jack read them slowly, and each word made his stomach turn with sickness. No one's children, do not return. Jack had heard stories about they were a proud species with strict beliefs about blood and family. Children born with certain markings were considered cursed. They brought shame to their families, and so they were thrown away like garbage, left to die in places where no one would find them. These two children had silver markings on their faces, thin lines that curved across their cheeks and foreheads like cracks in glass. To them, these marks meant bad luck, evil spirits, broken souls. To Jack, they just looked like two scared kids who were about to freeze to death. He knelt down slowly. The girl saw him and immediately pushed her brother behind her. Her blue eyes were wide with terror. She was waiting for him to hurt her. She was waiting for him to kick them or shout at them or drag them somewhere worse. That was all she knew. That was all she expected from the universe. Jack did not move. He stayed very still, the way you would with a frightened animal. "Hey there," he said softly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl did not believe him. Why would she? Every adult in her short life had hurt her, but she was too weak to run. The cold had taken most of her strength. All she could do was stare at this strange creature with its pink skin and worried eyes. Jack slowly removed his thermal jacket. It was the warmest thing he owned, specially designed to survive the brutal winters of Kestrel 7. Without it, the cold bit into him immediately. He ignored it. He leaned forward and gently wrapped the jacket around both children, covering them completely. The girl flinched at his touch, but when she felt the warmth, something in her face changed. Just a tiny bit, just a small crack in the wall of fear she had built around herself. The little boy peeked out from behind his sister. His silver markings were even more pronounced than hers. He was so small, so fragile. His blue lips were turning purple from the cold. Jack felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart stopping, but his heart opening. Something he had kept locked away for years came flooding out. He had lost his parents when he was young. He had grown up in group homes on Earth, passed from one place to another, never belonging anywhere. He knew what it felt like to be unwanted. He knew what it felt like to be no one's child. "You're mine now," he whispered. He did not plan to say it. The words just came out, rising from somewhere deep inside him. A promise made in the frozen darkness between a lonely man and two dying children. Jack reached out and carefully picked up the boy. The child weighed almost nothing. Then he helped the girl to her feet, keeping his arm around her to hold her steady. She was too weak to walk on her own. "Can you hold onto my back?" he asked her gently. She hesitated, then slowly she nodded. Jack crouched down and let her climb onto his back, her thin arms wrapping around his neck. He held the boy against his chest with one arm. Then he stood up and started walking toward home. The storm raged around them. The wind screamed and the snow flew sideways through the air. Jack could barely see 3 feet in front of him. His body was already going numb from the cold. But he did not slow down. He did not stop. He had spent his whole life alone. He had convinced himself that he was fine with that he did not need anyone. But now, with these 2 small lives pressed against him, depending on him, trusting him even though they had no reason to trust anyone, Jack realized how wrong he had been. He was not fine. He had never been fine. He had just been waiting for something to give his life meaning, waiting for someone to need him. The lights of his apartment building appeared through the snow. Jack walked faster. His legs burned and his lungs ached, but none of that mattered. He had found his purpose. He had found his family. And he was never going to let them go. The first night was the hardest. Jack brought the children into his small apartment and turned the heat up as high as it would go. He wrapped them in every blanket he owned and made them hot soup from a can. The girl ate a few small bites, but only after Jack left the room. The boy would not eat at all. Jack did not sleep that night. He sat in a chair near the couch where the children lay huddled together, and he watched them breathe. Their blue skin slowly returned to a healthier color as the warmth seeped into their bodies. The frost melted from their hair and left small puddles on his old blankets. Around midnight, the boy started crying in his sleep. The girl woke up and held him close, whispering words in a language Jack did not understand. In the morning, Jack called his neighbor. Was 63 years old and had spent 30 years as a medic on various colony ships before retiring to Kestrel 7. She had gray hair, sharp eyes, and a no-nonsense attitude that Jack had always respected. When he explained what had happened, she came over immediately. The children were terrified of her at first. The girl pushed her brother into the corner and stood in front of him with her small fists raised. She was so weak she could barely stand, but she was ready to fight, ready to protect the only family she had left. Knelt down slowly and showed her empty hands. "I am not going to hurt you," she said in a calm voice. "I am a healer. I want to make sure you are okay." It took almost an hour before the girl let examine them. The results were not good. Both children were badly malnourished. They had been starving for weeks, maybe longer. The boy had an infection in his lungs that needed medicine. The girl had old scars on her back that made his face turn dark with anger. "Someone beat her," told Jack quietly while the children rested. "More than once. These scars are months old." Jack felt his hands curl into fists. He was not a violent man. He had never started a fight in his life. But at that moment, he wanted to find whoever had hurt that little girl and make them pay. "Will they be okay?" he asked. Sighed. "Physically, yes. With food, medicine, and rest, their bodies will heal. But the damage inside their minds will take much longer. These children have been through terrible things. They do not know how to trust. They do not know what safety feels like. You will need to be patient with them." Jack nodded. He could be patient. The days turned into weeks. Jack took time off from work to stay home with the children. He learned that children needed more protein than human children, so he bought special food from the colony market. He learned that they were sensitive to loud noises, so he stopped watching action movies and played soft music instead. He learned that they slept better when a light was left on, so he bought a small lamp that glowed like a warm sunset. He gave them names. The girl he called Myra after a star his mother had loved. The boy he called Leo after his father. The children seemed confused by the names at first. In culture, names were earned, not given. But slowly they began to respond when Jack called them. The first real breakthrough came after 3 weeks. Jack was sitting at the kitchen table, reading a book on his tablet, when he felt something touch his arm. He looked down and saw Leo standing beside him. The little boy's silver markings caught the light as he tilted his head. "Jack," Leo said. It was the first word either child had spoken since arriving. Jack's eyes filled with tears. He smiled and gently touched Leo's cheek. "That's right," he said. "I'm Jack." Leo climbed into his lap and fell asleep there, his small blue hand clutching Jack's shirt. Myra took longer. She watched everything Jack did with suspicious eyes. She tested him constantly, waiting for him to show his true nature. She spilled her food on the floor and watched to see if he would hit her. He just cleaned it up and gave her more. She broke a cup and waited for him to scream. He told her accidents happen and showed her how to sweep up the pieces safely. She refused to go to bed one night, expecting punishment. He simply sat with her until she was ready. Slowly, the wall around Myra's heart began to crumble. 1 month after Jack found them, he filed for emergency guardianship through the Colonial Human Services Office. The process was complicated. There were forms to fill out, interviews to complete, and home visits to survive. But the caseworker assigned to him, a kind woman named Bate Owens, saw what Jack was doing for those children. She pushed his application through as fast as she could. "You know this will not be easy," Bate told him during one of her visits. "You are a single man with a modest income. You have no experience raising children, and these are not even human children. There will be people who question your fitness as a parent." Jack looked at Myra and Leo, who were playing quietly in the corner of the room. They were building a tower out of old food containers. Leo kept knocking it over and Myra kept patiently rebuilding it. She had not smiled yet, not once, but her face looked softer than before. "I know," Jack said, "but they need me, and I need them. Is that not what family is?" Bates smiled. It was a warm, genuine smile. "Yes," she said, "I believe it is." That night something changed. Jack was tucking the children into bed when Myra grabbed his hand. Her grip was tight, almost desperate. "Can we stay?" she asked. Her voice was small and scared, like she was asking for something she had no right to want. "Can we stay forever?" Jack felt his heart swell. He knelt beside her bed and looked into her blue eyes. "You can stay forever," he promised. "This is your home now. You are my family, and nothing in this galaxy will ever change that." Myra stared at him for a long moment. She was searching his face for lies. She was looking for the trick, the trap, the moment when everything would fall apart like it always did. She did not find any lies, because there were none. For the first time since Jack had found her, Myra smiled. It was a tiny smile, barely there, but it was real. It was the most beautiful thing Jack had ever seen. Leo reached up and touched Jack's face. "Family," he said softly. "That's right," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Family." Outside, the winter storm still raged across Kestrel 7. The cold wind still howled through the streets. But inside that small apartment, wrapped in warmth and safety and love, 2 blue children began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were worth something after all. And Jack began to believe that he was not alone anymore. 3 months had passed since that frozen night when Jack found 2 dying children in the cargo district. In that time, everything had changed. His small apartment no longer felt empty and silent. It was filled with the sound of Leo's laughter and Myra's quiet voice as she learned to read human books. There were drawings stuck to the refrigerator and toys scattered across the floor. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Jack had quit his job at the cargo warehouse. The hours were too long and the work was too dangerous. Instead, he had taken a position as a maintenance supervisor at the colony's main school. The pay was less, but the schedule let him be home when the children needed him. He walked them to the colony center every morning and picked them up every afternoon. Other parents sometimes stared at the strange little family, the human man with two blue-skinned children, but Jack did not care. Let them stare, let them wonder. These were his kids now. Myra was starting to come out of her shell. She still did not trust easily, and she still flinched at sudden movements, but the terror in her eyes was fading. She had started speaking more, asking questions about everything. Why was the sky gray? Why did humans have such strange ears? Why did Jack's coffee smell so bad? Jack answered every question patiently, even the ones he did not know the answers to. Leo was thriving. He talked constantly now, mixing words with human ones in ways that made Jack smile. He had become obsessed with a cartoon about a space explorer and insisted on watching it every evening. He still had nightmares sometimes, crying out in the darkness for people who were never coming back, but Jack was always there to hold him until the fear passed. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when everything fell apart. Jack was at work when his communicator beeped. The message was from Pete, the colony administrator. Pete was a gruff man in his 50s with a thick beard and a reputation for not taking nonsense from anyone. His message was short and urgent. "Get to my office. Now we have a problem." Jack ran the whole way. His heart was pounding when he burst through Pete's door. What he saw made his blood run cold. Standing in the middle of Pete's office were three. They were tall and elegant, with the same pale blue skin as Myra and Leo, but without any silver markings. They wore robes of dark purple that marked them as important officials. Their faces were cold and proud and looked at Jack like he was something unpleasant they had stepped in. The one in the center was a female. She was older than the others, with white hair pulled back in a tight braid and eyes like chips of ice. When she spoke, her voice was smooth and dangerous. "So this is the human who has been keeping our property," she said. Jack felt anger surge through him. "They are not property, they are children." The female smiled. It was not a nice smile. "I am High Matron of the Conquered. Those children you call yours are by blood, they belong to us." "You threw them away," Jack said. His voice was shaking, but not from fear, from rage. "You left them in the cold to die. They had a sign around their neck that said they were no one's children." Waved her hand dismissively. "That was a mistake, an error in judgment by a lower family. The situation has changed. The children must be returned." Pete stepped forward. He looked just as angry as Jack felt. "Changed how exactly?" Smile grew wider. "Our religious scholars have the ancient texts. The silver markings, which we once believed were a curse, are now understood to be a blessing. Those children are sacred. They must be brought home and raised in the temple with the honor they deserve." Jack could not believe what he was hearing. "Honor? You abandoned them. They were starving. They were freezing to death. Myra has scars on her back from being beaten. And now you want them back because your priests changed their minds." "Their past suffering is regrettable," said, though she did not sound regretful at all. "But it does not change the present reality. They must return to their people." Jack stepped closer to the High Matron. He was taller than her, broader than her, and right now he looked capable of violence. "Listen to me very carefully. Those children are my family. I found them. I saved them. I love them, and I will never let you take them." His eyes narrowed. "You are a human on a small colony in the outer reaches of space. The Conquered has ships. We have soldiers. We have political power that you cannot imagine. Do you really think you can stand against us?" "Yes," Jack said without hesitation. For a moment looked surprised. Then she laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. How amusing. The primitive species thinks it can defy us. Pete cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice was hard as stone. Hi, matron, I think you need to understand something about humans. When we find children abandoned in the cold, we do not leave them there. We take them in. We protect them. And once we do that, they are ours. By our law, by our custom, and by our hearts. Those children were abandoned. Jack saved them and has been raising them for 3 months. By human law, he is their legal guardian. And human law is the law of this colony. His face twisted with anger. This colony exists because the conquered allows it to exist. We could make your lives very difficult. Pete smiled. It was not a nice smile either. You could try, but I think you will find that humans are very difficult to push around, especially when children are involved. We get stubborn about things like that. The two officials behind shifted nervously. They had clearly expected this to be easy. They had expected the humans to be frightened and give in. They had not expected resistance. Stared at Jack for a long moment. Her ice-cold eyes seemed to be measuring him, judging him, trying to find weakness. Jack stared back without flinching. "This is not over," said finally. "We will return with proper authority. The Interstellar Council will hear of this, and when they rule in our favor, you will hand over those children, or you will face the consequences." She turned and walked out of the office, her robe sweeping behind her. The two officials followed quickly. When they were gone, Jack let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. His legs felt weak. His hands were shaking. Pete put a hand on his shoulder. "That took guts, son, standing up to her like that." Jack shook his head. "I did not even think about it. All I could see was Myra and Leo. All I could think about was protecting them." Pete nodded slowly. "That is what being a parent means, but you know this is not over, right? They have power, they will come back." "I know," Jack said, "but I made a promise to those kids. I told them they could stay forever. I told them they were my family, and I am not going to break that promise, no matter what." Pete looked at him with something that might have been respect. "Then we better get ready for a fight." Jack thought of Myra's small smile. He thought of Leo's laughter. He thought of the way they both ran to him when he came home, their blue faces lighting up with joy. "Yes," he said quietly, "we better." Story spread like fire across human space. It started with a reporter on Kestrel 7 who heard about the confrontation in Pete's office. She wrote a short article about the cargo hauler who had saved 2 alien children from freezing to death, and how the aliens were now trying to take them back. She posted it on the Colony News Network, expecting maybe a few hundred people to read it. Within 24 hours, it had been shared millions of times. Within a week, Jack's name was known on every human colony from Earth to the outer reaches. People who had never met him, who lived thousands of light years away, were talking about him at dinner tables and in coffee shops. They were angry, they were outraged, and they wanted to help. The messages started pouring in. Jack's communicator buzzed constantly with calls and texts from strangers. Some just wanted to tell him they were proud of him. Others offered money or supplies or legal advice. A group of human veterans said they would come to Kestrel 7 and stand guard outside his apartment if needed. Parents sent toys and clothes for the children. Teachers sent books. A famous chef from Earth sent a box of special food designed for biology. Jack was overwhelmed. He had never asked for any of this. He had not saved Myra and Leo to become famous. He had saved them because it was the right thing to do, because no child should ever freeze to death alone in the dark. But humanity did not see it that way. To them, Jack represented something important. He represented what humans could be at their best: kind, brave, unwilling to abandon the innocent. In a galaxy full of species who looked down on humans as primitive and emotional, Jack had shown that those emotions were a strength, not a weakness. They did not understand. They watched the human reaction with confusion and growing concern. To them, children were property of the clan. The needs of the individual did not matter compared to the needs of the group. The idea that millions of strangers would rally around two abandoned children simply because it was right was completely alien to their way of thinking. High Matron filed her complaint with the Interstellar Arbitration Council. She demanded that the children be returned to custody immediately. She claimed that Jack had stolen them, that he was holding them against their will, that he was damaging their cultural identity by raising them as humans. The council agreed to hear the case. It would be decided in 3 months. Jack needed a lawyer, a real one, someone who understood interstellar law and could argue before the council. He had no idea how to find one or how to pay for one. But once again, humanity came through. Her name was Grace. She was 52 years old, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that had seen everything. She had spent her career fighting for the rights of refugees, immigrants, and displaced persons across human space. She had won cases that everyone said were impossible to win, and she had never lost a case involving children. She contacted Jack 3 days after the story broke. She offered to represent him for free. "Why?" Jack asked her during their first video call. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Grace smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of someone who had fought too many battles, but it was warm. "Because I have spent my whole life believing that some things are worth fighting for. Those children are worth fighting for, and so are you." The preparations for the case were intense. Grace worked around the clock, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, building an argument that would stand up to lawyers, gave testimony about the children's condition when they arrived, the malnutrition, the scars, the signs of neglect and abuse. Bate provided records showing how Jack had cared for them, how he had changed his entire life to give them a safe home. Pete submitted official statements from the colony administration supporting Jack's guardianship. Meanwhile, on Kestrel 7, Jack tried to keep life normal for the children. He did not tell them about the case. He did not want them to be scared. But Myra was smart. She noticed the tension in his shoulders. She noticed the late-night calls and the worried looks. One evening, she came to him while he was reading over legal documents. Her blue face was serious. "Are they going to take us away?" she asked quietly. Jack put down the documents. He pulled Myra into his lap and held her close. "I am not going to let that happen, I promise." "But what if they win? What if the council says we have to go back?" Her voice cracked. "I do not want to go back. I want to stay with you. I want Leo to stay with you. You are our family now." Jack felt tears burn in his eyes. He blinked them back. "Listen to me, Myra. There are people all over human space fighting for you. Millions of people who have never met you who just want you to be safe and happy. Humans do not give up on children. We do not let them be taken away from people who love them. And I love you. I love you and Leo more than anything in this galaxy. So no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, you are my daughter. And that will never change." Myra buried her face in his chest. Her small body shook with sobs. But when she looked up again, there was something new in her eyes. Something that looked like hope. A few weeks before the council hearing, something unexpected happened. A journalist arrived on Kestrel 7. Her name was, and she had been sent by a news network to investigate the human who had caused so much trouble. She expected to find a primitive creature motivated by politics or greed. She expected to expose him as a fraud. Instead, she found Jack sitting on the floor of his apartment, helping Leo practice his letters. The little boy was giggling as he traced shapes on a tablet, his silver markings bright with joy. Myra was nearby, reading a book about Earth animals, occasionally asking Jack questions about what a dog was. Watched for a long time. Finally, she asked Jack the question she had come to ask. "Why did you take them? What do you gain from this?" Jack looked at her. His face was calm, his voice was steady. "I was walking home from work. It was cold and dark. I heard a sound. I found 2 children dying in the snow. They had a sign that said they were no one, that nobody wanted them, that they did not matter." He paused. "I know what that feels like. I grew up without parents. I grew up being told I was not worth anything, and I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to make sure another child did not feel that way, I would take it. He looked at Myra and Leo. His eyes were soft. They were cold, they were scared. They needed someone to care, so I cared, that is all. That is the whole story. Was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer, almost confused. Your people are strange, she said. You feel so much. You care about those who are not your blood. It is not logical. Jack smiled. No, I suppose it is not, but it is human. Left Kestrel 2 days later. Her report was broadcast across space. It did not call Jack a primitive or a fraud. Instead, it asked questions. Hard questions. Questions about whether a society that threw away its children had any right to demand them back. For the first time, the people began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong. And across human space, millions of people watched and waited for the Council's decision, ready to stand together no matter what came next. The Interstellar Arbitration Council met on a space station that floated at the exact center point between Earth and the... It was a neutral place, designed for exactly these kinds of disputes. Representatives from a dozen species sat in the Great Chamber, ready to hear arguments and render judgment. Jack made the journey with Grace at his side. He had to leave Myra and Leo behind on Kestrel 7 in the care of and Bait. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Myra had clung to him at the spaceport, her blue fingers gripping his jacket. Come back, she had whispered. Promise you will come back. I promise, Jack had said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. The hearing lasted 3 days. High Matron spoke first, her voice cold and confident. She argued that the children were by blood and by right. She claimed that Jack had interfered with their natural destiny by taking them in. She insisted that raising them among humans would damage their cultural heritage beyond repair. Then Grace stood up. She was not as tall as the lawyers. She was not as elegant or as intimidating. But when she spoke, the entire chamber fell silent. 3 months ago, 2 children were abandoned on a frozen mining colony. They were left to die in a snowstorm with a sign around their neck declaring them worthless. They were starving. They were freezing. One of them had been beaten so badly that she still carries the scars. The other was so traumatized that he could not speak. Grace paused. Her eyes swept across the chamber. And what did the conquered do? Nothing. They did not search for these children. They did not try to rescue them. They did not care if they lived or died. She turned to face directly. It was a human who found them. A cargo hauler named Jack who was walking home from work on a cold night. He did not ask what species they were. He did not ask if they were worth saving. He simply saw 2 children in danger and he acted. He gave them his jacket. He carried them through the storm. He took them into his home and nursed them back to health. He gave them names. He gave them love. He gave them a family. Grace's voice grew stronger. Now the conquered comes before this council and demands those children back. Not because they care about them. Not because they want to give them a good life. But because their religious leaders have decided that the markings which once made these children cursed now make them valuable. They want to take Myra and Leo away from the only person who has ever truly loved them and put them in a temple to serve as symbols. She shook her head slowly. That is not justice. That is not what is best for the children. That is a species trying to reclaim property that it carelessly threw away. And I urge this council in the strongest possible terms to reject this claim. The chamber erupted in murmurs. The representatives whispered among themselves. Jack watched, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. When the verdict came, it came quickly. The head of the council, an ancient being with silver skin and kind eyes, stood and read the decision. The Interstellar Arbitration Council has reviewed all evidence and heard all arguments. It is the finding of this council that the conquered voluntarily abandoned the children in question, as evidenced by the physical sign declaring them unwanted. Under interstellar law, Abandoned children become wards of whoever rescues them. Jack acted lawfully, morally, and compassionately. His guardianship is recognized and protected by this council. Jack could not breathe, he could not move. The head of the council continued. Furthermore, this council strongly urges the conquered to reconsider its cultural practices regarding the abandonment of children. Such practices are a stain on any civilization that claims to be enlightened. It was over, they had won. Jack's legs gave out. He sank into his chair, tears streaming down his face. Grace put her hand on his shoulder and squeezed. "You did it," she said softly. "They are yours forever." The news spread across the galaxy within hours. On Kestrel 7, people poured into the streets to celebrate. Called Jack with the communicator held up so he could hear Myra and Leo cheering in the background. Pete opened the colony's reserves of special drinks and threw a party in the main square. But the effects went further than just one family on one colony. The journalist had continued reporting on the case. Her coverage had sparked debates across society. Young people were questioning the old traditions. Families who had been forced to abandon children were speaking out, demanding change. And when the council's decision came down, it broke something open. The conquered, facing pressure from within and shame from without, made an announcement. The practice of abandoning children with silver markings would end. Immediately. Permanently. Families who had lost children to the tradition could petition to find them and reconnect. A new generation of leaders was rising, one that saw compassion not as weakness but as strength. Jack returned to Kestrel 3 days later. When his transport landed, half the colony was there to meet him, but he only had eyes for two small figures pushing through the crowd. Myra reached him first. She slammed into him so hard she almost knocked him over, her arms wrapping around his waist, her face pressed into his chest. "You came back," she sobbed. "You promised and you came back." Leo was right behind her, grabbing Jack's leg and refusing to let go. "Dad," he said. It was the first time he had used that word. "Dad, Dad, Dad." Jack dropped to his knees and gathered both children in his arms. He held them tight, feeling their small hearts beat against his chest, feeling the warmth of their bodies, feeling the incredible weight of being loved and needed. "I will always come back," he whispered. "Always, no matter what." The formal adoption ceremony happened 1 week later. It was held in Pete's office, the same place where Jack had faced down High Matron. But this time the room was filled with friends. Was there, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Bates stood in the corner, smiling. Grace had made the journey back to witness the signing. Even had come, recording everything for a documentary about the case. And in the front row sat a human girl named Sophie, who had become Myra's first real friend at school. She was holding Leo's hand. Jack signed the documents with a steady hand. When it was done, the official looked at Myra and Leo. "By the authority vested in me by the Colonial Human Services Office, I declare that these children are now legally the son and daughter of Jack. May this family be blessed with love, happiness, and many years together." Myra tugged at Jack's sleeve. Her silver markings shimmered in the light. Her blue eyes were wide and wondering. "Are we really yours now?" she asked. "Forever and ever?" Jack knelt down to meet her eyes. He reached out and brushed a strand of white hair from her face. He remembered the first time he had seen her, huddled in the snow, waiting to die. He remembered the promise he had made in that frozen darkness. "You were always mine," he said, "from the very first moment I found you." Leo climbed into his lap. Myra, for the first time in her life, initiated a hug. She wrapped her arms around Jack's neck and held on like she would never let go. Outside, snow began to fall gently on Kestrel 7. The same snow that had almost killed 2 children 3 months ago now looked soft and beautiful through the window. The world had not changed. The cold was still cold. The darkness was still dark. But inside that small office, surrounded by people who cared, A family was complete, not a family of blood, not a family of the same species, but a family built on something stronger than either. A family built on love. Jack stood up, holding Leo in one arm and Myra's hand in the other. He looked at the people gathered around him, friends and strangers who had become like family themselves. "Thank you," he said simply. "All of you, thank you." And then he took his children home. Years would pass. Myra would grow up to become the first raised by humans to serve as a cultural ambassador, building bridges between two species that had once been so different. Leo would study medicine, inspired by, and would spend his life healing others the way he had been healed. And Jack would tend his small garden on Kestrel 7, watch his children grow, and remind the galaxy through quiet example what humanity truly meant. Not power, not technology, not conquest, but compassion, kindness, and the stubborn refusal to ever leave a child alone in the cold. That was what made humans human. That was what made them worth knowing. That was what made them family.